Alright, hello everyone. Today I'm going to be going over what I consider to be the basics of the Unreal Engine 4. Starting with step 1, if you have not already, go and download the engine at unrealengine.com. Over here there's a big button that says download. You're going to need to sign up for an account and go ahead and log in. Then it'll download the Epic Launcher, which is this right here. Once that's downloaded, you go over here on the tab on the left to Unreal Engine. Under Library, you'll see that there are engine versions. You can press the plus sign here to add any of the previous or current versions you would like. At the time of this recording, we're on 421.2. You can see I can download a preview, which is the next version, but stick with whatever the current stable release is, and then you can also change which version launches when you press the button by going through here. On that note, there's also a lot of free content you can grab to help you while you're learning stuff. So one quick place, either on the website or in the Epic Games launcher, is the marketplace. Sometimes the launcher is a little slow, but you can go to the free section. So there's Epic Games stuff that they released themselves from some of their previous games, free for the month, which I recommend you grab every month because then it's gone and it costs a bunch of money. And then there's the permanently free collection. So go ahead and grab what you would like to use in your projects. A couple ones I recommend for just for playing around is the Open World Demo collection. Open World Demo, there it is. This one's good. So say if I wanted to download this one and then add it to a project to play with. It would have a purchase button here, you'd purchase it and then add it to your cart, press yes. That'll go then to your library once you have purchased any of those free marketplace add-ons. I'll show you how we're going to use them later. And then when you go to your library section up here, it'll show you all the stuff you have in the vault, all the stuff you can add to your projects. And there's tons of it, so it's really helpful to get going and to start learning stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to tutorial 1 is what I'm doing here. It may take a little while, it might not. So once you're ready to turn on the engine, just press launch. It could take a while depending on your setup. So while we're waiting, on that note, be patient with Unreal. Don't press the button 1,000 times, it'll just make your situation worse. This is what pops up after you press launch. If you have projects, they'll be here. Otherwise, go to new project and you can start from any of these templates. I recommend trying them out, whichever one seems appealing to you. Generally we'll start with kind of first person shooter thing or a third person platformer template. I'll do first person, and I already opened the project so you don't have to wait for that. But if you choose any of these templates, there's the desktop mode, which is what we're going to be, desktop/console, so it'll work for computer, PS4, Xbox, any Switch even if you want. The alternative would be mobile/tablet, which is iPhone and Android. If you're doing a mobile game or a tablet game, make sure to go to scalable 3D 2D, so it'll scale the graphics based on how good the tablet or phone is, or whether it's a tablet or phone. But we're going to stick with desktop console for the majority, or pretty much all of it. Starter content is good. It gives you a couple things. Mostly the main things that I like out of there are just the materials it comes with. It lets you slap some materials on things pretty quick. Always give your project a name so you're not digging around through my project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Just give it some sort of name so you can remember. Press create, and then it'll pop up in the engine. So here's what a blank first person template looks like. I guess first thing to know is you're going to want to kind of move around the environment. The default setting is to right click on your mouse, and that lets you rotate and look around. and then either use the arrows or WASD to kind of fly around like you would in a video game. Make sure you're still holding the right mouse button. So right mouse button and then WASD or arrows. It takes a little bit of getting used to. You have to kind of pull in and out and rotate and stuff. You can adjust the speed of the camera up here. So right now the default's 4. You want to slow it down if you're working in real tight on something. And if you have a huge world, obviously you want to speed it up. But be careful because you might go flying off into nowhere land and you might have a hard time seeing where you went. So keep it around 4 or 5 to start. After that, once you're comfortable moving around, you can kind of see what the editor is made out of. This is the viewport area right here. We are currently looking at it in perspective mode. We can also change to different modes like top, bottom, what have you. And then next to the modes, there's like, how do you want to see the mode? Do you want to see it in wireframe, lit, unlit, and so on. Wireframe and some of these modes are more useful for lining things up, you know, precisely on a grid, how you want them to be exactly lined up. And it's in 3D space, so you might want to look at it from multiple angles. But generally we'll just work in perspective. It's easier to look at. You can tweak some of your resolutions here and some of your settings and your layouts. You can go, some of the more interesting things are to do like a 4-pane layout, so you could do, you can look at the same scene. And again, this is kind of the same controls to move the viewport around. I'm using a right mouse button and then the middle mouse button scroll to zoom in and out. It lets me move it around. And that way you can kind of make sure things are lined up from the top, the side, the front, every angle. And you can go between all of them. You can choose a viewport and then just maximize it. Or you can also click in here and switch back to just the 1-pane layout. Depends what kind of work you're doing. If you're doing some level design, you're probably going to wind up in one of these kind of layouts. So play with some of those. Let's see. There's also, if you ever need to hide or show stuff, you can find it here. Well, I'm not going to cover. I'm going to just kind of cursory go over most of the things, and I can cover in more detail in future videos. So I guess some of the more important things are how to move stuff around. So say if I want to move this guy around, you just left click on it, and then there's move, rotate, and scale like there would be in any 3D modeling package. Those correspond to WER on the keyboard, which is nice because that's kind of where your hand sits if you're already using WASD to move around. So if you want to speed up your workflow, remember those. They're just all in a row. It's pretty easy. And you can also click up here, you know, just choose I want to move. I recommend using the arrows, so make sure you know which one's highlighted. If I want to only go on the x-axis, I'll just grab that one. There's a little gizmo here that tells you which axis is which. It's kind of helpful. And if I only want to pull up, I'll just pull up on the Z. Another little helpful trick is if you press the end key, it'll drop whatever object you have down to the geometry below it, the ground plane, whatever it may be. And you can see when I move stuff here, it leaves a shadow. And it tells me right here, lighting needs to be rebuilt. That's because the lighting is predetermined. You build it ahead of time. And once I've moved it, it keeps that lighting, the shadow that it already built, and it won't change until I build the lighting again. So I'll go over that at the end. Usually I'll do the lighting at the end, but for now we're just doing move, rotate, and scale. You can see it's kind of locked into increments of 10 right now, which is nice because if I'm trying to line things up, you know, 90 degrees, it's nice and easy. You can change how the, it's called snap. You can change how much it snaps. You can change it to 15 degrees. If I do 90 degrees, then it's just like, you know, snaps like that. 15 is the default. If you want to turn snapping off entirely, you can click the orange icon and you can just tweak it as much as you want. So that's good if you're just doing like random environment stuff. If you're doing kind of a level block out, you might want to leave the snapping on. And that's also true for, this is for move, and this is for rotate, and this is for scale. And you can determine, you can see when I move this thing, it kind of snaps. If I turn up the snapping, it'll snap in bigger chunks, you know, so it's good when you have maybe a character that can jump, you know, 100 units, then you want to have your objects snap every 100 units. If you're just randomly or specifically placing stuff, you can turn that off and move it wherever you want. And the same for scale. So that's how you move some stuff around. Let's go on to some of the other panels. Over here is your modes panel. This is where most of the action happens, as far as putting things into the world, just as a starting point. So we have a bunch of categories. Basics. You would only use so as far as geometry goes, you can use a basic. You can drag it in here, and then I can put it down, I can scale it, what have you. And that's totally fine for blocking out a level. So if you're just kind of making how a level works, you can do that, and they have collision, you can jump on them, you can walk on them, they're just a basic kind of block. Nothing much more than that. The box trigger is useful, you'll find out later. Player start, point lights, these are kind of commonly used stuff when you're prototyping a level. Lights, we'll get into that later. I'll do a video on each of these categories pretty much, but just so you know, they're there. Today I'll cover the geometry, I guess, at least real quick. So instead of using the basics, the problem with the basics is they don't hold textures very well. So let me see. I guess I'm gonna have to dig into the content browser a little bit while I'm talking about this. So in the content browser, this is where all your stuff is. Everything that the project is made out of, all the assets, all the maps, all the sounds, anything you want. If you click this button right here, it'll show you kind of a easier layout, in my opinion. You can click the little caret arrow things, and it'll open up each category. For now, like I mentioned earlier, the starter content, we're gonna go to the materials folder, and you can see here's my materials. You can change how these appear by going to view options, and you can kind of drag how big you want the scale of the thumbnails to be, which is handy. So let's say if I wanted to put, I don't know, this old brick right here onto an object. That shows up fine, right? If I scale it, we have problems. That's why I don't prefer using basics if you're actually going to keep the geometry in the game. But it is as simple as that. If you want a material on something, you just click and drag it. And again, you'll see you can't control how large or small it is, so it's not really going to work for us. Oh, and just like any other program, Control Z, it's undo, it'll remove whatever change you just made, and it's very useful. It's your best friend. So back to geometry. Let's say I want to actually put some geometry down and use it as, let's do a stair. Say I want to make some stairs. I can just, if you have a material selected, so I'm going to say I want old clay brick stairs. It should just apply itself automatically if you already have it selected. If you don't have any material selected, let's say I have something else like that, it'll just be a blank stair, and then you will have to go and do this tedious work of putting it on each and individual polygon. But that being said, that can also be helpful. So if I wanted maybe brick stairs and wooden tops, you can do that, you know. Maybe not this nice polished texture, but you get the idea. So if you have a material selected first, it applies it basically. Let's do a box. We'll do just some kind of high-tech material. And this is all in the starter content under materials. So if I drag in a box, That's fine. You can see here it says add. I can also subtract. So what that means is if I click subtract and I want to, let's say, put a cylinder in here, and I hate to jump between panels, but over here you can adjust basically all the details of any object. So in this case, I'm going to add some more sides to my cylinder to make it maybe more circular. And again, I'm going to use my move, rotate, scale tools to, I guess, make it kind of like this. And you can see when I move it into something, since I did it in subtract mode over here, when I move it in, it cuts a hole. And I can cut a hole all the way through to the other side. And that can be edited however you want, and it's dynamic. If you move the subtraction brush, it changes as you move it. So you can get a lot of shapes going like that. But if you got to make sure you kind of keep your addition and subtraction brushes together. I guess the one easy way to do that is over here in the outliner, like I mentioned. This is pretty much everything in the world. You can see here's my box brush and here's my cylinder brush. I can hold shift and click them both, and then right click and do group, and now they're basically together. So when I move one, it moves them both. I can also ungroup them, but that's a good way to keep your changes intact. There's also, okay, let's try a couple other things while we're doing geometry. One little trick is if you want to duplicate your geometry, you just select it and hold Alt and then drag it in any direction, and it'll create a duplicate of itself. It's super helpful. So let's say I wanted to pull this up and make these stairs taller. Now I can do that. You can see I want to edit this though, because that's not quite what I want. I mean, I guess I could put a box under here and make it work, but there's one more mode we can use for geometry. It's over here called geometry editing. If it doesn't appear, there might be a little arrow because you might not have enough space, but click geometry editing, and then you can click either vertices, faces, or edges. You just have to click them. You don't have to press anything special, and then you can just modify them and pull it to where you need it to be. Now I got some stairs. That can be done with any of these geometry objects. That's why they're a lot more useful than basics. So if I want to just kind of make it all wacky or move it up, so I mean, for example, a lot of my students try to go and like build like a house or something really quick. Let's say I'll just do whatever, wood. If I wanted to put down a house real quick, I could just drop a geometry box in here. Let's use something more obvious as a texture. I think that brick texture was pretty obvious to see. So if you just put a geometry in there and you're like, okay, I just want to make it bigger, so I'll just scale it. See what it does to the texture. It ruins it. To turn this into a wall, the easiest way would just be go to geometry editing, and first let's just kind of squish it together. And again, move, rotate, scales here, or WER. So I'll squish it together. I'll grab this face and I'll make a longer wall. Not entirely sure how tall I need to make it. We'll get into that later. But let's get rid of this too. It's kind of in my way. To delete something, you just click on it and press the delete key. So say there's that one, and I'll use the other trick that I was talking about. If you hold Alt, I can just drag another wall. If I hold Alt, I can drag another one and kind of just line it up. You can use what I was talking about earlier, like the quad view mode, to really line it up properly. Because if you're doing it just kind of freestyle in the viewport, that's fine, but it won't necessarily be perfect. And if you're getting paid, it should be as close to perfect as you can do. So just for this purpose, there we go. And I can tell this side's not quite lined up. I will just select the face and move it on over. And let's say that's good enough for our purposes. And I'll hold Alt again, duplicate it again. And the same deal up here. Oh, I think I messed up. Oh, you got to turn off geometry editing mode. You have to go back to some other mode, because otherwise it'll just try to move part of the geometry. So there's that. Good enough. Now I got like a room. If I wanted to put a top on it, I just do this because this is mostly what people try to do first. Try to see if you can build a room. Another way to build a room is to just build a big cube and then subtract a smaller cube from inside of it. So let's put the roof on top. You can see how the quad view is helpful now. And then go back to the editing mode, grab it, and just pull it over to basically right there where we needed it. So we got a box, but we have no way to get into the box. We're going to go back to geometry over here and make sure you're on subtract this time. And just drop in a subtraction box and go ahead and cut yourself out a door. You can scale these, but it does still mess up the texture. You're still better off using geometry editing mode and moving them like that. So that's how you do basic geometry stuff. You can go really crazy with it and model almost anything. You can model like whole cathedrals pretty easily, and once you get like one part down, you can just duplicate it over and over. You can even duplicate these subtraction brushes. If you want to select more than one thing, you can hold Control. So say, I grab both the subtraction brushes by holding Control. I'm going to hold Alt, drag them over here, and now I got windows on that side. But for this demo, I'm going to do it with just like one window so we don't have too much light going in there. Also, my roof's a little off here, so let me fix that. Good enough. Okay, so back to one pane view. That's some basic geometry, how to put it down, remove it from itself, edit it, duplicate it, things like that. Let's go ahead and just delete the walls. Just click them all and press the delete key. And I'll show you quickly just how to do a landscape. Next video I'll cover how to texture it, a little bit more detail information, but just so you know what all these buttons are, I'll go to landscape here. And you can press fill world and it'll fill up this whole world. You can change how big you want it, all that good stuff here. And like I said, we're going to need a texture that has multiple textures that can blend together. But for now, I'll just put grass on it. So if you select a texture or a material, and you press the arrow, it'll choose that one. You can also click this and search for it in here. It's just kind of easier for me to grab what I want and then click it. So once you set up the size you want with all these selections, just press create. And now you have a basic world. The grass isn't showing because, well, it has to compile shaders, but my computer's pretty quick. Just a quick thing on sculpting, you can change the brush size, the strength of it, how sharp the fall off is, which is like how smooth or sharp the edges. And kind of just click and drag around, make some cool mountains. You can hold shift and it does the opposite. It goes down instead of up. There are multiple tools, so you can press flatten and kind of drag from one area to the other and it'll flatten it all out. Which is good if you screw up and want to, or it's good for making a plateau, whatever you're using it for. Ramps, they can make kind of a straight ramp. It's good for like maybe vehicle games or something. But yeah, try not to make it, like, you want to change the size, you want to actually eventually put patterns and alphas and change all this stuff up, but for now, just play around with the basics. You can do, like, hydro erosion. You're supposed to, like, add, like, valleys for where the water might go, you know? But always start off with, like, a lower strength and then kind of go over it in multiple passes. You don't want to do it all at once. Noise is good, but you want to drop that really low and have maybe a huge brush, actually, like very low. And then if you have a big brush, it'll add kind of subtle variation to your ground. But yeah, change your brush sizes, use some of these different tools. We'll get into painting on the next one. I'll show you how to paint like rock faces, maybe snow or dirt, what have you. And I guess I'll leave it at that for this one. Next one, I'll go into how to make foliage, how to make the painting material for the landscape. I will just briefly show you how to do a light. So there's lights back in our normal mode panel, the first one called place. You can go to lights and just drop in a point light, and you can see it lights up the room. Like everything else, all the options are over here, so you could, you know, change the light color, change how bright it is, what have you, all these different options. And you can see I made all these changes, so the lighting needs to be rebuilt. The lights will always look bad until you rebuild them. Once they're built, everything will run faster, but beware, it does take quite a while. So if you want to build stuff, you go up here and press build. You can also do the click down arrow thing and just do build lighting only. Not sure how long that would take on my computer for this setup, but beware, it does take quite a while sometimes. So it'll kind of hog a lot of your computer's resources most of the time. Let's say, okay, I want to test this level. Like, I'll get into more details of why my character has no body, what's going on here, all that good stuff, what all this stuff is. But just so you can kind of play with the editor, that'll get you going. If you want to play the game, you can't do it while lighting's being built, but you can press play here. There's different types of play. You can play in the selected viewport, which is just in the viewport I already have right here. Or you can do new editor window, PIE, play in editor or something like that. And that'll pop up a whole new game window, which is nice. And since I used the first person shooter template, it comes with a gun that has a projectile that has physics. And that's about all it has. You can walk around currently, you can jump. The geometry we made will have collision, so we can walk on it. We can go check out in here. The subtraction brush got rid of collision here, but the walls still have it. So I can actually walk through there nice and easy. I have my light here. Obviously you'll want to generally put an actual model that the light is coming from, like a lamp or something. And all this will say preview until you build the lights, by the way. But that's going to be it for this first one. It's kind of a lot of info, so play with that. I'll make a few more soon, and I hope that was useful for you. Alright, thanks. Bye.